The nocturne lounge on a Friday night smelled like aged leather and secrets older than the city itself. I'd worked here long enough, 18 months this October, to know the rhythm of the place like my own pulse. The way Edison bulbs cast amber shadows across exposed brick. The low hum of conversations that never quite broke the spell of whatever jazz standard drifted from the vintage turntable behind the bar. The cool weight of cocktail trays balanced against my hip. I preferred it this way. Dark, atmospheric. A place where I could move through my shift like a ghost. Noticed only when absolutely necessary. Table 7 needs another round, Brenwyn called from behind the bar, her copper-red hair catching the low light as she polished a whiskey glass. She'd been my lifeline since I started here, the kind of friend who'd learned to read the tension in my shoulders from 20 feet away. Already on it, I navigated between tables with practiced ease, smile professionally distant, the kind that said I'm here to serve, not to chat. It was a skill I'd perfected over months of careful practice, being present in body while remaining invisible in every way that mattered. The couple at table 7 barely acknowledged me as I set down their drinks, too absorbed in whatever clandestine meeting had brought them to Portland's Pearl District on a night when the rain hammered the windows like impatient fists. My phone vibrated in my apron pocket. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Trump had called 32 times this week. 32. I'd been counting because after 25, the number stopped being just annoying and started being something I could show the police. If I ever worked up the courage to go to the police, 4 months since I'd walked out of his apartment with nothing but a backpack and my mother's photograph. 4 months of what should have been freedom but felt more like holding my breath underwater, waiting to see how long I could last before my lungs gave out. Klyukvina. Brenwyn caught my wrist as I passed the bar again, her Irish accent thickening with concern the way it always did when she was worried. That's the 5th time you've checked your phone in an hour. It's nothing. Bullshit. Is it him again? I didn't answer, which was answer enough. Brenwyn had been there the night I'd shown up for my interview with a split lip I'd tried to cover with foundation 3 shades too light for my skin. She'd hired me anyway. No questions asked beyond, "Can you start tomorrow?" Later, over staff drinks, I'd learned she'd escaped an abusive situation herself back in Dublin. Some wounds recognized their mirror images. Trump figured out where I work, I said quietly, rearranging cocktail napkins that were already perfectly aligned. He's been calling the main line. Harley said he left 4 messages with her last night alone. Brenwyn's expression went from concerned to dangerous. Has he shown up? Not yet, but he will. He always does. I tried to keep my voice steady, professional, like I was discussing the weather and not the systematic dismantling of my sense of safety. Yesterday he was outside my apartment. Didn't approach, didn't say anything. Just stood across the street for 2 hours. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Klyukvina, you need to file for a restraining order. I busied myself wiping down a section of bar that didn't need it. It won't help. It's legal protection. It's a piece of paper. The words came out harsher than I intended. Paper doesn't stop men like Trump. It just makes them angrier. And I'm not documented yet. My immigration paperwork is still processing. If I go to the police and he decides to make trouble, I didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Trump had made the threats explicit enough during our last fight. 1 phone call, Klyukvina. 1 phone call and I can have you on a plane back to Moscow. You think ICE cares about your little barista visa extension? You're nothing here without me. You're nothing anywhere without me. Brenwyn opened her mouth to argue she always did. Stubborn Irish woman that she was, then closed it as her eyes tracked toward the back of the lounge. You're vampires here. I didn't need to turn around to know she meant table 13. Draven Salastri had claimed that particular corner booth as his territory 6 weeks ago, appearing every Friday like clockwork just after sunset, always alone. Always dressed like he'd walked out of a gothic romance novel, black button-down, leather jacket that probably cost more than my monthly rent, silver rings on elegant fingers, always ordering the same thing, a glass of Chateau Margaux, 47, with something darker mixed in, that made Harley, our sommelier, nervous every time she poured it. He's not my anything, I muttered, though my eyes betrayed me by seeking him out across the dim lounge. There, table 13. Draven sat in his usual spot, positioned so he could observe both the entrance and the entire main floor. His pale face caught the amber light, all sharp cheekbones and intense focus, those unsettling eyes the color of old blood tracking across the room with predatory precision, as if feeling my gaze. Those eyes found mine and held for 3 heartbeats before I forced myself to look away. He watches you, Brenwyn said, her voice lower now. Every week, barely touches his drink, barely moves, Just watches. I know. And I did know. I'd felt the weight of Draven's attention for weeks now, that prickling awareness that came from being observed by something that wasn't quite human. I'd grown up on Russian fairy tales about Upari, the undead things that hunted in the dark. My babushka's warnings about vampires had seemed like superstition, until I'd seen Draven move, seen the way shadows clung to him like old friends, seen his reflection flicker in the bar mirror like a television with bad reception. My phone buzzed again. This time I did check it. Text from an unknown number. I know you're working tonight. We need to talk. I'm coming by. Don't make a scene. My blood went cold. Bran, I see it. She'd been reading over my shoulder. You want me to call the cops? And say what? My ex-boyfriend wants to talk? Your ex-boyfriend is stalking you. The front door opened. Rain and cold air rushed in, and with them, Trump Mitchell. He stood in the entrance, soaking wet, chest heaving like he'd run the whole way from wherever he'd been waiting. His eyes scanned the lounge with manic intensity until they found me behind the bar. When they did, his expression shifted into something that made my stomach drop, that terrible combination of hurt and fury that I'd learned to recognize as the prelude to violence. Klyukvina. My full name, pronounced wrong, weaponized. We need to talk. Now. Every conversation in the lounge stuttered to silence. Every eye turned toward the scene unfolding at the entrance, including... I realized with a strange flutter of something between fear and relief, the blood-red eyes watching from table 13. Trump took a step toward me, then another, and Draven Silastri stood up. Trump took another step forward, dress shoes squelching against the polished concrete floor, leaving wet footprints like accusations. The entire lounge held its breath, patrons frozen mid-conversation, glasses suspended halfway to lips, even the jazz record seeming to drop to a lower, more ominous register. Did you hear me? His voice carried that particular edge I'd learned to recognize. The one that meant he was past reasoning, past pretending to be the charming man who'd first approached me at that open house in Southeast Portland 18 months ago. You have the most beautiful accent. Where are you from? Russia? God, that's exotic. You must feel so alone here. Let me help you. Help. That's what he'd called it in the beginning. Help with my visa paperwork. Help finding an apartment. Help practicing English. Though my English had been perfectly serviceable, the help had slowly, methodically transformed into something else. Entirely questions about where I'd been, who I'd spoken to, why I needed friends when I had him. The help became a cage with bars made of dependency and fear. Trump. I kept my voice level, professional, the same tone I used for difficult customers. You need to leave. We have nothing to discuss. The fuck we don't. He moved toward the bar, and I instinctively stepped back, colliding with the shelves behind me. Bottles rattled. You blocked my number. You moved without telling me. You think you can just disappear? After everything I did for you? Russian women endure, my babushka's voice whispered in my memory. We survive winter. We survive war. We survive men who think they own us. We don't complain. We don't ask for help. We simply outlast them. But I was so tired of enduring. Everything you did to me, I corrected, and saw his face flush with rage at the distinction. Branwen moved beside me, phone already in hand. I'm calling the police. You have 10 seconds to leave voluntarily. Trump's laugh was ugly. Call them, please. I'd love to explain to Portland PD how my ex-girlfriend, how my Russian girlfriend has been working here on an expired visa, how her paperwork is stuck in immigration limbo, how one conversation with the right people and she's on a flight back to Moscow. His eyes found mine, and the triumph in them made my stomach turn. You think you're free, Klyu? You're not free. You're mine. You'll always be mine because without me, you're nothing in this country. The words hit like physical blows because they carried the weight of truth. My work visa extension was processing. My application for permanent residency was pending. I existed in America in a state of legal precariousness that Trump had spent 2 years exploiting, had weaponized so thoroughly that the thought of going to the police filled me with paralyzing dread. I filed for a restraining order, I said, though my voice shook. The papers are with the court, papers that haven't been signed yet, papers that won't be signed because I know people. Klyukvina. I know lawyers. I know immigration officers. I know exactly how to make you disappear. He took another step closer, and Branwen positioned herself between us, all 5'4" of Irish fury. You take one more step and I break your nose, she said flatly. Ex-cop, I know where to hit. Trump ignored her. his focus laser-locked on me. "Come outside. We'll talk. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." "No. 5 fucking minutes, Klyukvina." His hand shot out, faster than I could process, faster than Branwen could intercept. Fingers closed around my wrist, the left one. The one I'd fractured 2 years ago falling down his apartment stairs. Or at least that's what the hospital report said, though we both knew I'd been pushed. His grip was crushing, possessive, meant to hurt and control in equal measure. Pain exploded up my arm. I heard something crack, a sound like green wood breaking, and my vision whited out for a moment. When it cleared, I was making a sound I didn't recognize, something between a gasp and a scream, Russian pouring from my lips in a desperate stream. "Отпусти меня, отпусти, больно, пожалуйста." "Let me go, let go. It hurts. Please." Trump yanked me toward the door. My feet scrambled for purchase on the wet floor. Branwen was shouting. Someone else screamed. The entire lounge erupted into chaos. And then Trump wasn't holding me anymore. The transition happened too fast for my pain-shocked brain to process. One moment his fingers were crushing my wrist. The next he was gone, wrenched backward with such force he actually left the ground for a second. When my vision focused, I saw him pinned against the exposed brick wall 10 feet away, held there by a hand wrapped around his throat. Draven Salastri stood between us, and he wasn't human. I'd suspected for weeks, but suspicion and certainty were different countries. The man, the thing holding Trump against the wall, had moved faster than physics should allow. His face was different now, sharper somehow, more angular, as if the mask of humanity had slipped just enough to reveal the predator underneath. His eyes caught the amber light and reflected it back red, like a wolf's in headlights. "The lady," Draven said, his voice carrying an accent I couldn't place, and a resonance that seemed to vibrate in my chest. "Asked you to leave." Trump struggled, face reddening. "Who the fuck?" Draven's free hand caught Trump's wrist, the same wrist Trump had used to grab me, and I heard bones grind together. Trump's scream was high and sharp and satisfying in a way that should have disturbed me but didn't. "I suggest you listen," Draven continued, conversational, as if he wasn't casually crushing a man's bones. "She's asked politely. Her friend has asked politely. I am asking considerably less politely. You're breaking my fucking wrist." "Yes." The word held no remorse. "Consider it a lesson in empathy." Draven released him, and Trump collapsed, cradling his injured wrist against his chest. He looked between Draven and me, calculation warring with pain and fury in his expression. For a moment I thought he'd attack again, thought whatever madness was driving him would override self-preservation. Then Harley appeared from the back office, phone to her ear. "Police are 2 minutes out." That broke the spell. Trump scrambled to his feet, still clutching his wrist, backing toward the door. "This isn't over, Klyukvina. You think some pretty boy bouncer scares me? I'll be back. We're not done." He fled into the rain, leaving wet footprints and the echo of threats. The lounge remained frozen for 3 more heartbeats, then slowly, uncertainly, returned to motion. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. The jazz record continued its melancholy progression. Branwen immediately turned to me, reaching for my injured wrist. I cradled it against my chest, afraid to look, afraid to assess the damage. My entire arm throbbed with a deep, nauseating pain that suggested something was very wrong. Tears leaked from my eyes without permission. Pain, tears, not emotion, though the emotion was there too, roiling beneath the surface. "Hospital," Branwen said firmly. "Right now. I can't afford." My voice broke. "I don't have insurance. Not until my visa processes. The hospital will. Klyu, your wrist is broken." I knew. God, I knew. I could feel the wrongness, the way the bones sat at an angle they shouldn't. But hospitals meant bills I couldn't pay, meant documentation I couldn't risk, meant questions about how a waitress broke her wrist and whether police should be involved. "Let me help," Draven's voice. Close now, though I hadn't heard him approach. He stood at the edge of my peripheral vision, giving me space, not crowding. "Please, unless you can fix immigration papers and make ex-boyfriends disappear, you can't fix anything." The words came out bitter, exhausted, Russian accent thickening the way it always did when I was too tired to maintain the careful American pronunciation I'd practiced. Draven's smile was slight, sad, and carried the weight of centuries I didn't yet understand. "I can do one of those things right now. The other will take slightly longer." Before I could process that statement, he was moving closer, hand extended. "May I?" I should have said no, should have pulled away, should have demanded explanations, should have done anything except extend my shaking, broken wrist toward a man, a thing I barely knew. His fingers closed around my wrist with infinite gentleness, and I gasped. Not from pain, though I'd expected it, but from cold. His touch was ice cold, impossibly so, like plunging my arm into a snowbank. And then, heat. Not external heat, but internal, like my bones themselves were warming from within. The pain didn't fade so much as transform, shifting from agony to something almost pleasant, almost right. I felt movement under my skin, felt bones sliding back into alignment with a sensation like puzzle pieces clicking into place. The entire process took maybe 10 seconds. When Draven released me, my wrist was unmarked, unpainful, perfect. I stared at it, then at him, then at Bronwyn, whose face had gone sheet white. "Что ты?" The Russian came out automatically, my brain too shocked for English. "What are you?" Draven's smile widened slightly, revealing teeth that were just a fraction too sharp. The answer to that question requires better lighting and much stronger alcohol than they serve here. "Come." He gestured toward table 13. "We should talk before the police arrive and start asking questions neither of us wants to answer." The back office of Nocturne smelled like old leather and cleaning supplies, a sharp contrast to the atmospheric elegance of the main floor. Branwen had guided me here with the efficiency of someone who'd dealt with crisis situations before, settling me into a chair while she pulled out the first aid kit, pointless now, given that my wrist showed no evidence of ever being broken. But the ritual seemed to calm her. Draven remained near the door, giving us space, his posture somehow both relaxed and alert. The predatory edge I'd glimpsed earlier had smoothed back into something more human, though now that I'd seen beneath the mask, I couldn't unsee it. 2 police officers arrived within minutes. Young and clearly annoyed at being pulled away from whatever they'd been doing, they took statements with the bored efficiency of people who'd responded to domestic disturbance calls 1,000 times before. Yes, an ex-boyfriend had harassed an employee. No, he hadn't stolen anything. Yes, he'd grabbed her wrist. No, she wasn't injured. I showed them my unmarked wrist, felt Branwen's sharp intake of breath beside me. Yes, we'd like to press charges. No, he was gone before they arrived. The officers promised to file a report, advised me to follow through on the restraining order, handed me a card for a victim's advocate, and left with the air of people who knew nothing would come of it. "That's it?" Branwen asked the empty office after they'd gone. "That's all they do?" "That's all they can do," I said quietly. My English felt thick, clumsy. I wanted to speak Russian, wanted the comfort of my mother tongue, but force of habit kept the words buried. "He's gone. No crime scene. No witnesses willing to testify against a citizen on behalf of..." I gestured at myself, at everything I represented. Foreign, temporary, disposable. "That's shite." Branwen's accent always thickened when she was angry. Absolute shite. He should be in cuffs. "He will be," Draven said from the doorway, his voice carrying a certainty that should have been comforting but instead sent ice down my spine. Eventually, Branwen turned to face him fully, arms crossed, ex-cop instincts clearly activating. "You're that investor everyone whispers about, aren't you? The one who owns the building, the one who never shows up for daytime meetings." "I prefer evening ambiance," Draven said mildly. "I'll bet you do." Branwen's eyes narrowed. "What you did out there moving that fast, breaking his wrist like it was nothing that wasn't normal." "No," Draven agreed. "It wasn't." The silence stretched between them, loaded with implications Branwen was clearly working through. Finally, she looked at me. "You want me to stay?" Did I? Part of me wanted exactly that, wanted my friend's solid human presence as a buffer between me and whatever Draven Salastri actually was. But another part, the part that had grown up on Babushka's stories about things that walked in darkness, knew that some conversations required privacy. "I'm okay," I said, not entirely sure it was true. Branwen studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll be at the bar. You scream. I come running with a broken bottle. Clear? Clear." After she left, Draven gestured toward the door. "There's a private area upstairs, more comfortable for complicated conversations." I followed him up a narrow staircase I'd never noticed before, hidden behind what I'd always assumed was a storage closet. The upper level of Nocturne was clearly not for public consumption. Exposed beams, vintage furniture that looked both expensive and ancient, walls lined with books in languages I couldn't identify. A single booth sat near the window, velvet upholstery the color of dried blood. "Sit," Draven said, though it sounded more like invitation than command. "Please." I sat, and he settled across from me, with the precise economy of movement I now recognized as deeply unnatural. In the better lighting, away from the amber glow of the main floor, I could see more clearly what he was. Skin too pale, too perfect, as if carved from marble. Eyes that caught light wrong, the absolute stillness of someone who didn't need to breathe except for appearances. "Что ты?" I asked again, the Russian escaping before I could stop it. "What are you? In your language?" "You would call me Upir," he said, pronunciation perfect, accent carrying hints of something older than modern Russian. In English, vampire. I should have laughed. Should have stood up, walked out, reported him to someone for something. Instead, I felt a bubble of hysteria rising in my chest that emerged as exhausted, slightly manic laughter. Of course you are. Why not? My life is already nightmare. Why shouldn't monsters be real too? I don't blame you for skepticism. I'm not skeptical. I'm Russian. We grow up with these stories. My babushka told me about Upiri before I could read. I just didn't think. I gestured helplessly. In Portland, in an upscale lounge. Wearing designer clothes and reading Dostoevsky. Would proof help? He asked it gently, giving me the choice. Yes. What followed was a demonstration that shattered whatever remained of my understanding of reality. Draven smiled, and his canines elongated not dramatically, not like movie monsters, but enough to be undeniable. He gestured at the silverware on the table, and it rose without him touching it, floating in lazy circles. He plucked a rose from the vase between us and held it in his palm, and I watched it age in seconds, petals browning, withering, crumbling to dust. Боже мой, I breathed. My God. Not God, Draven said quietly, setting the dust aside. Just very old and very tired. How old? I was turned in 1518. Florence. I was a merchant's son with more ambition than sense. He leaned back, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely weary. 506 years of watching the world change while I remain frozen. And you've been, what? Watching me? For weeks? Yes. Why? He was quiet for a long moment, those ancient eyes studying my face. Because I recognized the signs, the way you mapped exits, the way you flinched at raised voices, the way you made yourself small and invisible, as if not being seen was the same as being safe. His jaw tightened. I did that to someone once, a woman I loved in the 1600s. I was young, by vampire standards barely a century old, and I didn't understand yet what immortality meant, what power meant. What happened? I loved her obsessively, monitored her movements, controlled who she spoke to, told myself it was protection when it was really possession. She withered under my attention like a plant without sun. His voice had gone flat, emotionless, the way people sound when discussing trauma they've had centuries to process but never overcome. When she died from illness, from despair, from the weight of being so completely controlled, I swore never again. Never attachment, never love, never anything that might let me repeat that mistake. I thought about Trump's messages, his surveillance, his constant demands to know where I was, who I was with, what I was doing, the suffocation of his attention. Then why are you here? Why help me? Because I recognize what he's doing to you. Because I did it to her, and I've had 5 centuries to regret it. Draven's eyes met mine, and there was such ancient sorrow there that I had to look away. If I can stop even one woman from experiencing what she did, from being destroyed by a man who calls possession love, perhaps that's something. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Text from my landlord. Call me. Emergency with your apartment. My stomach dropped. The apartment looked like a crime scene, though technically no crime had been committed beyond trespassing. Trump had my key, I'd never gotten it back, had been too afraid to ask, and my landlord hadn't changed the locks despite my requests. Red spray paint covered the walls. Timoya in letters 3 feet high. You're mine. My few possessions were destroyed, clothes shredded with what must have been scissors or a knife, books torn apart, the framed photograph of my mother ripped to pieces and scattered across the floor like snow. But the worst part, the part that made bile rise in my throat, was the sound. A Russian lullaby played on loop from a Bluetooth speaker left on my bed. Spiatu Stalia Igrushki. My mother had sung it to me as a child. I'd mentioned it once, Months ago, in a moment of nostalgia, Trump had remembered. Branwen, who'd insisted on coming with me, put a hand on my shoulder. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only stand in the doorway of what had been my sanctuary and understand, with terrible clarity, that nowhere was safe. Trump had been in my home, had touched my things, had left this message in my mother's language, the language of my childhood, deliberately violating even that space. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and dialed the number Draven had given me before I'd left Nocturne. He answered on the first ring. Klyukvina. He was in my home. My voice sounded distant, disconnected. He knows where I sleep. Where are you? I gave him the address. Pack a bag. You're not staying there tonight. I can't afford hotel. You're staying with me. His voice was firm but not commanding, offering, not demanding. Guest room. Locked door. Your choice to leave whenever you want. But tonight, you don't face this alone. I looked around my destroyed apartment, at the shredded remnants of the life I'd tried to build, at my mother's photograph torn into pieces. Thought about Trump's hands going through my things. Thought about sleeping here, knowing he had a key, knowing he could return. Give me the address, I said. Draven's mansion sat in Portland's West Hills like something out of a Gothic novel, all turrets and gables and windows that caught the city lights below. A restored Victorian that probably predated most of the neighborhood, isolated by mature trees and the kind of wealth that bought privacy. As his car pulled through iron gates that opened without him touching them, I felt like I was crossing into another world entirely. You live like museum, I said as he led me inside, my bag heavy on my shoulder. Everything is old, preserved, frozen in time. The interior matched the exterior hardwood floors that gleamed with centuries of care, furniture that belonged in European castles, art on the walls that I suspected was original rather than reproduction. Nothing modern except the subtle lighting and the security system panel by the door. It felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum for someone who'd stopped living long ago. When you live as long as I have, Draven said quietly, leading me up a curved staircase. You either embrace change or become a relic. I've been trying to choose the former. He paused at the landing, glanced back at me. I'm not always successful. The guest room he showed me was larger than my entire destroyed apartment had been. King bed with posts that nearly touched the ceiling, ensuite bathroom with a clawfoot tub, windows overlooking the city, curtains thick enough to block any light, and on the inside of the door, clearly recently installed, a heavy deadbolt and chain lock. Locks are for your peace of mind, Draven said, staying carefully in the hallway. I can't enter unless invited. It's not just courtesy, it's physical law for my kind. This room is yours, completely. Your sanctuary. I studied his face, looking for deception, but found only earnest honesty. Really? Test it if you don't believe me. So I did. Closed the door, locked it, heard him move away down the hall. Then I deliberately dropped my bag, let out a small cry of pain, fake, but convincing. Listened for footsteps, for any attempt to override his own rule. Nothing. Silence. Except I'd dropped my bag onto a water glass I'd set on the side table, and now actual glass shards littered the floor. One had sliced my palm not deep, but enough to bleed. Klyukvina? Draven's voice, urgent, from the hallway. Are you hurt? Just cut my hand. I'm fine. May I? He stopped, started again. You're bleeding. If you need help with first aid, there's a kit in the bathroom cabinet. I looked at my hand, at the blood seeping through fabric, then at the door. Made a choice. Unlocked it, opened it. I can't reach the bathroom with glass everywhere. Can you help? He hesitated in the threshold, visibly straining against something invisible. You need to say it. Explicitly. Come in, please. The barrier broke, and he crossed into the room, immediately kneeling to pick up glass shards with preternatural speed and precision. But I saw the moment he registered. The blood saw his entire body go rigid, saw his jaw clench, saw his eyes flash red for just a second before he forced them back to brown. When he looked up, his fangs had descended, sharp and undeniable. I should go. His voice was strained. You need rest. When did you last feed? The question came out steadier than I felt. That's not your concern. If you're hungry and I'm bleeding, it is. Draven stood, back toward the door, with his hands raised, non-threatening. I have arrangements, blood banks, donors who consent. I don't feed from unwilling sources. Never. Not in 500 years. His accent had thickened, stress pulling at his careful English. But you're injured and bleeding, and I should not be in this room. Can you still help with the cut? Yes, but let me. He closed his eyes, breathed deeply though he didn't need to breathe, and when he opened them again the fangs had retracted. Bathroom. I'll help you clean it properly. He bandaged my hand with gentle efficiency, never once letting his skin contact the blood directly, using gauze and medical tape as barriers between us. When he finished, he left without another word, and I heard his footsteps descending the stairs rapidly, putting distance between himself and temptation. I sat on the guest bed, cradling my bandaged hand, and realized that I felt safer here in a vampire's house than I had in months in my own apartment. The irony wasn't lost on me. The courthouse smelled like anxiety and bad coffee. Branwen sat beside me on the hard wooden bench outside the courtroom, her presence solid and reassuring as we waited for my case to be called. I'd barely slept, despite the comfort of Draven's guest room, too wired on adrenaline and the surreal knowledge that I was being protected by something that shouldn't exist. Yaroslava, Klyukvina, the bailiff called. The judge was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who'd clearly seen too many cases like mine. She reviewed the evidence with practiced efficiency. Photos of my destroyed apartment that Branwen had insisted we take, the police report from Nocturne, witness statements from other staff members. Then Trump walked in with a lawyer, and my stomach dropped. He looked perfect. Pressed suit, clean-shaven, the image of a respectable American citizen. His wrist was bandaged Draven's handiwork, and he used it like a prop, cradling it gently as he sat down. Your Honor, his lawyer began, smooth and practiced. Mr. Mitchell and Miss Yaroslava had a consensual romantic relationship that ended amicably. My client believes Miss Yaroslava is upset that he ended things and is using the legal system as retaliation. The lie was so brazen, so perfectly delivered, that for a moment I couldn't breathe. Miss Yaroslava? The judge looked at me. Your response? I stood, feeling Branwen's hand squeeze mine once before letting go. He told me he would have me deported if I left him. My voice shook but held. He used my immigration status as weapon. For 2 years. I stayed because I was afraid, not because I wanted to. That's absurd, Trump's lawyer said. Mr. Mitchell was merely helping Miss Yaroslava navigate complex immigration. He had my passport, I interrupted, Russian accent thick with emotion. For 18 months. Said he was helping with paperwork. Would not give back. I had to wait until he left it in apartment to take it. That is not help. That is hostage-taking. The judge's expression shifted slightly. Mr. Mitchell, did you have possession of Miss Yaroslava's passport? Temporarily. For visa paperwork. She gave it to me willingly, because he said I would be deported without his help. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking, showed the texts I'd saved. Here and here. One call to ICE and you're gone. You're nothing in this country without me. Try to leave and I'll make sure you never work in America again. The judge took my phone. Read in silence. Her lips thinned. Restraining order granted. 500 yards minimum distance. No contact of any kind. 2 years. She looked at Trump over her glasses. Mr. Mitchell, if you violate this order, you will be arrested immediately. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. His voice was tight with barely suppressed rage. As we filed out, Trump's eyes found mine, and the look he gave me promised that this wasn't over. Paper judgment or not, he wasn't done. He proved it that same evening. I was working my shift at Nocturne when Branwen grabbed my arm, nodded toward the windows. Trump's car sat across the street, just far enough to technically comply with the 500-yard order. Headlights on, engine running. He sat in the driver's seat, visible in silhouette, watching. I'm calling the cops, Branwen said. By the time police arrived 10 minutes later, he was gone. But my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Legal papers won't protect you. I know where you work. I know where you sleep. I know what you're worth in Moscow, if I make one phone call. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped a tray of drinks. Draven appeared at my elbow. I hadn't heard him come in. Hadn't seen him at table 13. You're done for tonight. I'll drive you home. I have 3 more hours. You're shaking. You're pale. You're done. Not a command, just observation. Unless you want to stay? I looked at my trembling hands, at Branwen's concerned face, at the windows where Trump had been minutes ago. Take me home. Except home was his mansion now. And somehow that felt more right than my destroyed apartment ever had. Somewhere normal. I told Draven when he asked where I wanted to eat. With fluorescent lights and bad coffee. Somewhere that doesn't feel like. I gestured vaguely at his expensive car, his expensive clothes, the expensive life he'd built over centuries. He took me to a 24-hour diner off Highway 26. The kind with cracked vinyl booths and laminated menus and waitresses who'd seen everything. We sat in a corner booth, and I ordered coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the Cold War. "You've lived 500 years, I said after the waitress left. "I'll be lucky to see 80. How can this mean anything to you?" Draven was quiet for a long moment, hands wrapped around a coffee cup he wouldn't drink. "I've existed for centuries. Most of it was empty, mechanical, feeding, surviving, avoiding connections because connections meant pain. You make me remember what it felt like to care about someone's tomorrow. That's not answer. The answer is that immortality is meaningless if you spend it alone." His eyes met mine, ancient and sad. "I'd rather have decades with someone real than centuries with no one. Quality of time matters more than quantity when you have infinite quantity." I studied his face, looking for lies, for manipulation, for anything that resembled Trump's practiced charm. Found only honesty that felt like it cost him something to give. "Show me your library." The request surprised him, but he smiled. "Now? Now. If I'm staying in your house, I want to know who you are. And people's books tell truth better than their words." The library took up the entire third floor, walls of books in languages I could identify, and dozens I couldn't. First editions, illuminated manuscripts, volumes that probably belonged in museums. Ladders on rails provided access to the higher shelves. Reading chairs sat by windows that overlooked the city. I found the Russian section an entire wall, and pulled down a collection of poetry. Akhmatova, Tsvetayeva, Pushkin, names I'd grown up with, words that felt like home. "Ya nauchilась prosta, mudro zhit," I read aloud, settling into one of the chairs. "I have learned to live simply, wisely." Akhmatova's words, familiar as breathing. Draven sat across from me, eyes closed, perfectly still in that way that reminded me he wasn't human. Just listening. When I finished the poem, he opened his eyes. "Your accent is beautiful," he said quietly. "Don't ever hide it." Something in my chest cracked open. Trump had always made me practice American pronunciation, had corrected my errors, had implied that my Russian accent made me less professional, less valuable. And here was this centuries-old creature telling me my voice was beautiful exactly as it was. I stood, crossed to where he sat, looked down at this impossible man who'd protected me, sheltered me, asked for nothing in return. "Draven." "Yes?" I leaned down and kissed him. His lips were ice-cold at first, but warmed under my touch, his hands trembling as they came up to cup my face with impossible gentleness. The kiss was tentative, careful, both of us terrified of pushing too far or not far enough. When he pulled back, his eyes had gone red again, but there was no hunger in them, only wonder. "I need you to be certain," he whispered. "Once we cross this line." "I've never been more certain of anything," I said, and kissed him again. The underground fight club operated out of a converted warehouse in southeast Portland, the kind of place that existed in the margins, where legality blurred into something darker. Trump found it through a contact at work, someone who owed him a favor and knew people who knew people. The air inside smelled like sweat and blood and desperation, the crowd roaring as two men beat each other senseless in a makeshift ring. Trump nursed his wrist, still aching weeks after that thing had crushed it. The doctors baffled by the pattern of fractures and scanned the faces around him until he found the one he'd been told to look for. Lucien Ashford sat alone at a corner table, late 40s with the bearing of someone who'd seen combat and never quite left it behind. Scars traced his forearms, visible beneath rolled sleeves, and tattoos crawled up his neck, crosses and sigils and symbols Trump didn't recognize, but instinctively understood as religious. Or maybe a cult, maybe both. "You Ashford?" Trump asked, sliding into the empty chair without invitation. "Depends on who's asking." Lucien's voice carried the flat affect of someone who'd learned to compartmentalize emotion. His eyes, pale gray and unsettlingly focused, cataloged Trump in seconds. "You look like a man with a problem. I need help dealing with someone who's not human." That got Lucien's attention. He set down his whiskey, leaned forward slightly. "Tell me more." Trump described what he'd witnessed at Nocturne, the impossible speed, the crushing strength. The way Draven had moved like physics was optional. "He's pale as a corpse. Only shows up at night. Owns half the Pearl District. But nobody ever sees him during the day. And he's taken my girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend, I'm guessing, or you wouldn't be here. Temporary situation, Trump said, jaw tight. She's confused. He's manipulating her. Or protecting her from you. Lucien's expression didn't change, but something in his tone suggested he'd taken Trump's measure and found him wanting. This man, tall, dark hair, owns Nocturne Lounge? You know him? Draven Salastri. Lucien pulled out his phone, scrolled through files until he found a photo grainy, taken from distance, but unmistakably the same creature who'd humiliated Trump. I've been hunting him for 20 years. He's careful, never makes mistakes, never gets attached to anyone or anything that could be used against him. He's attached now. Trump leaned back, satisfaction cutting through the pain in his wrist. To my girlfriend. To Klyukvina. Then he's finally made a mistake. Lucien studied the photo, something dark and satisfied crossing his features. I can help you. You help me trap him. I eliminate the problem. Your girl comes running back once her protector is gone and she realizes what he really is. Trump hesitated. He'd come here looking for leverage, for muscle, for someone who could make Draven back off, not for an executioner. What exactly do you mean by eliminate? I mean, I'm going to kill him. Lucien said it the way someone might discuss taking out the trash. Practical, necessary, devoid of emotion. That's what I do. That's what I've done for 30 years since a vampire killed my daughter. The grief underneath the words was old, calcified into something harder than hate. Trump recognized it because he carried his own version, the rage at losing something he'd considered his. The need to punish anyone who'd taken it away. Deal, Trump said, and they shook on it. 2 weeks had passed since I'd moved into Draven's mansion, and somewhere along the way, it had stopped feeling like temporary shelter and started feeling like home. A routine had developed that felt both domestic and surreal. I worked evening shifts at Nocturne while Draven handled whatever business vampires handled in the dark hours. Then he'd appear at closing to walk me home through Portland's rain-slicked streets. Home. His mansion was home now. The word felt dangerous and right simultaneously. Again, Draven said, his voice patient as we sparred in the private gym he'd built in the basement. Use my momentum against me. You're smaller, so you need to be smarter. He moved toward me slowly, giving me time to react. I sidestepped, grabbed his extended arm, used the technique he'd taught me to redirect his weight. He went down easily, too easily, clearly allowing it, but still. The satisfaction of seeing him on the mat was immense. Better. He stood in one fluid motion, no trace of breathlessness because he didn't need to breathe. But in real confrontation, your attacker won't be gentle. Again, faster this time. We'd been doing this every afternoon for a week now. His centuries of combat experience distilled into practical techniques for someone my size, against opponents larger and stronger. It felt important, reclaiming my body as something powerful, rather than something to be grabbed and controlled. Now you, I said that evening in the kitchen, after we'd both showered and I'd changed into comfortable clothes. I teach you something. What did you have in mind? Borscht. My mother's recipe. You're going to learn to cook like a Russian. He'd looked skeptical but willing, and now stood behind me at the counter, his hand covering mine as I demonstrated proper knife technique for cutting beets, his chest pressed against my back, cool even through layers of clothing, his breath unnecessary but still warming my neck. Like this, I murmured, guiding the blade. Uniform pieces, patience, patience. His voice was rough. I've had 5 centuries to learn patience, and yet. He didn't finish the sentence, but I felt the tension in him, the want carefully restrained. We hadn't consummated this thing between us, both too aware of power imbalances, both taking time to build something real rather than rushing into physical release. But the tension was there, constant and electric. And yet, I prompted, turning my head slightly to look at him. His eyes had gone red, fangs barely visible when he spoke. And yet with you, patience feels impossible. I set down the knife, turned in his arms. Then maybe we should. My phone buzzed. Branwen's name flashed across the screen. I almost ignored it, almost let this moment continue, but something in the pattern 3 rapid calls in succession made me answer. Klyu. Branwen's voice was urgent. Your ex met with someone. Yesterday. At that fight club on Division. Military type, covered in tattoos, looked like hired muscle. Cold dread displaced the warmth in my chest. What? Rory saw them. He was there placing bets. Said your ex and this guy were having an intense conversation. shook hands like they were making a deal. She paused. You need to tell your vampire boyfriend. He's not it's complicated. Complicated is going to get you killed. Tell him. Now. After I hung up, I relayed the conversation to Draven. Watched his expression shift from concern to something darker, more dangerous. Describe this man. The one Trump met with. I repeated Branwen's description, late 40s. Military bearing. Religious tattoos covering visible skin. Cristo, Draven breathed, the Italian curse from his mortal life escaping. Lucien Ashford. You know him? He's a hunter. Specializes in vampire elimination. Draven began pacing, preternatural speed making the movement blur. Lost his daughter to a rogue vampire decades ago. Now he sees us all as monsters needing extermination. Are you? The question came out before I could stop it. Monsters? Draven stopped pacing, met my eyes. Some of us. I've done monstrous things, Klyukvina. Killed when I should have shown mercy. Fed from the unwilling before I learned better. I've had 5 centuries to become something better, to choose compassion over convenience. Not all of us make that choice, but you did, eventually, after enough regret. Lucien's surveillance was professional, thorough, and deeply disturbing. He documented everything Klyukvina entering and leaving the mansion, her work schedule at Nocturne, the routes she walked, the people she spoke to. Each photo was time-stamped, location-tagged, building a comprehensive pattern of her life. She's the key, he told Trump at their second meeting, spreading the photos across a table in the same warehouse where they'd made their deal. Draven will come for her. When he does, we'll be ready. He opened a duffel bag, revealing an arsenal that made Trump's stomach turn silver blades etched with Latin, vials of what looked like water but smelled wrong. Wooden stakes that had clearly been used before, UV lights powerful enough to burn. The tools of vampire hunting, accumulated over 3 decades of obsession. You're going to kill him, Trump said, not quite a question. I'm going to send him back to hell where he belongs. You accept that? Trump thought about Klyukvina's defiance, her refusal to come back to him, the way she looked at that creature like he was something precious rather than monstrous. She made her choice. The package arrived at the mansion just after sunset, left on the doorstep by someone who'd known exactly when to deliver it. Draven opened it to find surveillance photos, dozens of them. Klyukvina's face in every frame, and a note in Latin that made his blood run cold. Quis custodiet ipsos custodes? Who watches the watchman? Lucien's signature. His calling card, the promise that he knew. He'd found them, and the hunt was on. I found Draven in his study, surrounded by the photos, his expression carved from stone. What is it? Lucien knows about you, about us. He gestured to the surveillance evidence. This is going to get worse before it gets better. I can send you somewhere safe, out of state, out of country. I have resources. No. The word came out hard, final. I'm done running. Klyukvina, you taught me to fight back. In your gym every afternoon, you taught me I don't have to be prey. I moved closer. Took his cold hands in mine. Now we fight back together. If you stay, you're in danger. Not just from Trump, from Lucien, from things you don't understand. He'll use you to hurt me, and he won't care what happens to you in the process. Then help me understand. I squeezed his hands, felt the centuries of control in the way he held himself so carefully. But don't ask me to run again. I won't. Not from Trump, not from this hunter, not from anything. I'm done being the wolf that runs. Teach me to be the wolf that bites back. The message came 3 days later, innocuous and devastating. Portland General Hospital. Room 347. Trump Mitchell admitted after car accident. Asking for you. Says he wants to apologize. Please come. I stared at my phone, sitting at Draven's kitchen table with cold coffee and the remains of breakfast I couldn't finish. He materialized behind me. I still hadn't gotten used to how silently he moved and read over my shoulder. It's a trap. No hesitation. No doubt. Has to be. What if it's real? My voice sounded small even to myself. What if he's actually hurt and I ignore him, and he dies, and I could have... You owe him nothing. Draven's hand settled on my shoulder. Cool through my shirt. After everything he's done, you owe him less than nothing. I owe myself the knowledge that I'm better than he is. I looked up at him, needing him to understand. That I don't abandon people. Even people who hurt me. Even if it's stupid. Even if it's dangerous. I need to know I'm not like him. Draven was quiet for a long moment, those ancient eyes searching my face. Finally, I'm coming with you. I'll stay in the shadows, But I'm not letting you walk into potential ambush alone. He'll see you. Only if I want him to. Portland General's parking garage was half empty at 10 p.m., our footsteps echoing off concrete as we made our way inside. Draven stayed close, hand resting at the small of my back, radiating tension that made my own nerves spark. The room number led us to an older wing, signs posted indicating renovation in progress. The hallway lights flickered, half of them dark, giving everything an abandoned quality that made my instincts scream. Klyukvina. Draven stopped me at the threshold. We can still leave, but I was already pushing through the door into room 347 and finding it empty. No hospital bed, no medical equipment, just construction supplies and the smell of fresh paint and something else, something metallic and wrong. I knew you'd come, Trump's voice, from behind me, from the corridor where he'd been waiting. He stepped into view, blocking the exit, and his smile was terrible. You're too soft, too forgiving. That's why you need me. Why you'll always need me. Draven materialized beside me, moving from shadow to solid in a heartbeat. She doesn't need you. She never did. And here's the pet monster. Trump's smile widened. Right on schedule. The UV lights activated before either of us could react. Industrial construction lamps rigged with bulbs that shouldn't exist, pouring ultraviolet radiation with an intensity that made Draven scream. His skin blistered instantly, smoking, and he staggered back with his arms raised defensively. Draven! I moved toward him, but Trump grabbed my arm, the same arm he'd fractured weeks ago, like he couldn't help but return to the same violence. Stay still, Klyu. This will be over soon. Lucien Ashford stepped from another doorway, crossbow raised, the bolt tipped with silver that caught the terrible light. Draven Salastri. 5 centuries of feeding on innocence ends tonight. He fired. The bolt caught Draven's shoulder, punching through with force that sent him to his knees. Silver poisoning spread visibly from the wound, veins darkening, skin graying. Draven gasped, purely reflexive. No need for air but centuries of habit, and his eyes found mine. Run, he managed. Please. No. I wrenched free from Trump using the techniques Draven had taught me. Elbow to solar plexus, weight shift, heel stomp on instep. Trump fell back, gasping, and I positioned myself between the UV lights and Draven, casting a shadow that gave him inches of relief. Lucien was already advancing with more weapons, holy water and grenades, a silver mesh net, the wooden stake strapped to his thigh. Centuries of vampire hunting experience against Draven weakened and poisoned. It wasn't a fair fight. Klyukvina, run! Draven's voice carried command, desperation. I fear I'd never heard from him. Get out! Net, I said in Russian, the language of my childhood, of my mother, of everything I'd ever loved and lost. Nibestiba. No, not without you. Trump recovered faster than I expected. Must have been adrenaline, or madness, or the same obsession that had brought us all here. He pulled a knife from his jacket, something with a serrated edge meant for hurting, not killing quickly. If I can't have you, he said, voice shaking with rage and tears. Neither can he. He lunged. I dodged left, but the blade caught my forearm anyway, slicing deep enough that I felt it scrape bone. Blood welled immediately, hot and red, splashing onto the dusty floor. Draven smelled it instantly. His head snapped up, eyes going from red to something darker, something that predated civilization. The scent of my blood willingly shed, spilled, protecting him, did something to him that broke through silver poisoning and UV burns, and 5 centuries of carefully maintained control. He moved, tore through the silver mesh net like it was tissue paper, caught Lucien's next crossbow bolt bare-handed and crushed it, fought with a ferocity that was more beast than man, all fangs and claws and inhuman strength fueled by primal need to protect. But Lucien was experienced, prepared, and Draven was weakened. Within seconds, Lucien had him pinned against the wall, wooden stake raised high, positioned perfectly over Draven's heart. For my daughter, Lucien said, and drove the stake down. I threw myself between them, didn't think, didn't hesitate, just moved on instinct older than thought. The stake pierced my side instead of Draven's chest, punching through skin and muscle with a pain so intense my vision whited out. I heard Draven scream my name, heard Trump's shocked curse, heard Lucien's sharp intake of breath. My blood willingly shed, sacrificially given, splashed across Lucien's weapons. The holy symbols tattooed on his arms began to burn, smoke rising from his skin. His blessed crossbow fell from nerveless fingers, searing his palms. The silver net ignited with cold fire. Impossible! Lucien gasped, staggering back as his own weapons turned against him. Draven caught me as I fell, his hands impossibly gentle for all their supernatural strength. Why would you do that? Because you're worth protecting too. I managed through pain that made speaking difficult. Blood soaked my shirt, warm and sticky. Too much blood. Not monster. Worth. Saving. Draven's face was terrible rage and fear and anguish warring for dominance. When he looked at Lucien, his expression went flat, emotionless, more frightening than any fury. You have 5 seconds to leave before I forget 5 centuries of restraint. Lucien backed toward the exit, cradling his burned hands, his weapons scattered and smoking. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Draven's voice carried finality. She chose me. Her faith, her sacrifice, broke your weapons. You can't win against that. Faith works both ways, Hunter. And hers just proved stronger than yours. Lucien fled, but not before throwing back. You'll get her killed. Maybe not today, but eventually. Your kind always does. Trump tried to run too. I saw him moving toward the door in my peripheral vision, saw Draven's head snap toward him with predatory focus. Draven moved faster than physics allowed, caught Trump by the throat, slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. Don't, I gasped out, each word costing. He's not worth it. He hurt you. Draven's fangs were fully extended, pressed against Trump's jugular, one bite away from ending him. And if you kill him, you become what Lucien says you are. Monster. I tried to sit up, failed, settled for keeping my eyes open. Let the law handle him. Draven held Trump there for 5 more seconds, an eternity compressed before his eyes went from black to red to something almost human. When he spoke, his voice carried weight that made reality bend. You're going to walk to the nearest police station, Draven said, each word dropping into Trump's mind like stones into water. Compulsion. Vampiric influence. The thing that made humans cattle when wielded without restraint. You're going to confess to assaulting Klyukvina Yaroslava, to violating a restraining order, to conspiracy to commit murder. You're going to do this because the alternative is that I find you again. Do you understand? Trump's eyes went glassy, vacant. Yes. Then go. Trump walked away like a puppet with visible strings, mechanical and empty, heading toward whatever justice waited. Draven watched him disappear, then immediately returned to me, gathering me carefully against his chest. Hospital, I started. No, not after this scene. I need to heal you, but it requires my blood. His voice shook. It will hurt, and it might change you slightly. Not turn you, I'm not strong enough for that, but strengthen you. I need your consent. Do it. He bit his own wrist without hesitation, tearing through skin and vein, and pressed the wound to my lips. Drink. The taste was copper and cold, and something indefinable that my hindbrain recognized as other. I gagged, nearly vomited, but forced myself to swallow. Once. Twice. 3 times before darkness claimed me, and I felt my wounds beginning to close from the inside out. I woke in Draven's bed, not the guest room, his actual bedroom, with dawn light filtered through blackout curtains and bandages wrapped around my torso. Draven sat in a chair beside the bed, still as only vampires could be, watching me with eyes that held 5 centuries of fear. You saved my life, he said when he saw I was awake. You almost died. I told you I was done running. My voice was rough, throat raw from screaming I didn't remember. That means I'm done letting people fight my battles too. You're infuriating. But he was smiling, just slightly, and there were tears on his face that he didn't bother wiping away. Reckless, magnificent. You're immortal, possessive, and you taste terrible. We both laughed, exhausted, emotional. The kind of laughter that came from surviving something that should have killed us. When it faded, I reached for his hand. This is going to work, isn't it? I asked. You and me? Draven brought my hand to his lips, kissed it with reverence that made my chest ache. I've lived 500 years. I've never been more certain of anything. He kissed me then, desperate, grateful, alive in the way only people who'd faced death truly understood, and I kissed him back, tasting my own blood still on his lips, tasting the impossible future we were choosing together. The wolf had learned to bite back, and she'd found a monster worth loving.